agreed to, and I call the member for Dawson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to speak on the Fair Work Legislation Amendment, Closing Loopholes Bill 2023. But first, I would like to talk about a Swiss cheese paradox. Swiss cheese, as we all know, has a lot of holes. The more holes you have, the less cheese you have. And the more cheese you have, the more holes you have. Therefore, the more cheese you think you have, the less cheese you actually have. And you might think Willcox has gone mad. Why is he talking about cheese in Parliament? Well, this new bill under Labor is Swiss cheese. And with it brings its own Swiss cheese paradox. It's not only confusing, it's complex. And Labor reckons they're closing the loopholes, when in fact what they're doing is adding more holes. Frustratingly, I've been asking the House a lot lately, what is Labor actually doing for the Australian public? And it seems the answer is not much. Because here I am asking the same question again. So let me explain it to you. Then let me tell you what this is going to mean for the people in my electorate of Dawson. The Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Mr Burke, announced a 280-page bill to amend the Fair Work legislation. And along with it came a 521-page explanatory memorandum. That's 801 pages in total. Unbelievable. And we're being told that it's good for the Australian public. However, in reality, the only people that this is going to benefit from these amendments are the unions. How typical. Here are the facts. The Fair Work legislation amendments are impossibly complex. The Fair Work legislation amendments are going to cost business billions in wages. The Fair Work legislation amendments are going to cost consumers more, and this is the last thing that Australians need in a time of a Labor-created cost of living crisis. And Minister Burke has openly admitted to all of these things. What I don't understand is he doesn't seem to care, when in reality caring about legislation he creates is his job. What has he done instead of caring? He's developed a Fair Work legislation amendments that are anything but fair. All they will result in is job losses at a time of a Labor-created cost of living crisis. Again, and this is another Russ decision made by the Albanese Labor government, without consultation, without speaking to peak representative bodies, without speaking to businesses, and without consulting the people that this bill is going to directly impact. The public outrage over these amendments have been staggering. Jennifer Westcott, the Chief Executive of Business Council of Australia, has said, Australians should have safe jobs, well-paid jobs and rewarding jobs. But the government's radical shake-up of the industrial relations system will not deliver that. These changes will create confusion and extra costs for consumers, making it harder to hire casual workers and create uncertainty for employing anybody. Any government that's serious about a cost of living would not do this. What a statement. Any government that's serious about cost of living would not do this. But that's exactly what the Labor government is doing. The same job, same pay change in this bill are going to be the bill that all Australians are going to have to pay. With this one policy, the nation's economic security is under assault, and this couldn't have come at a worse time. Speaking to one business owner in my electorate, his staff costs have already gone up 11.4% since February alone. So why is the Albanese Labor government intent on crippling business further? Same job, same pay will mean a labour hire worker who is brand new to the business will, by law, have to be paid the same as an employee with decades of experience. But don't worry. Minister Burke said business can just pass on these increased costs onto the already struggling consumer. Sounds fair, right? As long as the unions still get their check. But that's not all. These amendments will mean that Fair Work will have the power to dictate the hours of work for independent contractors, the pay rates for independent contractors. These hard-working Australians became independent contractors because they want to. They want to be able to choose their own hours, choose where they work, and choose how they work. These Aussie workers choose their lifestyle because it suits them. Who does the Albanese Labor government think they are to take that choice away from our hard-working Australian public? And what does this industry think of the policy? Well, Tanya Constable of the Minerals Council Australia has said the Albanese government's latest industrial relations legislation changes are the most extreme, interventionist workplace changes that has ever been proposed in Australia. The changes will inflict immense harm to the economy, the weight of which will fall on the shoulders of the most vulnerable Australians, who will pay more for their groceries, housing and energy. And Andrew McCullough, the Chief Executive of the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, has said the legislation will be bad for productivity, those wanting to be their own boss, and consumers struggling with the cost of living crisis. The only winners in this are the union chiefs. The only loophole this bad legislation is looking to close is that of the plummeting union membership. This is a continuation of a radical industrial relations agenda, and we are all bracing ourselves for further risky changes to our workplace system. Deputy Speaker, speaking of crippling businesses, this next one, in my opinion, is a direct attack on small business. Minister Burke has publicly admitted that this bill will add to the complexity to an already unduly complex system. 801 pages of complexity, to be exact. And, Deputy Speaker, the small businesses in my electorate do not have the IR teams or the HR teams to go through this bill with a fine-tooth comb just to understand it. Instead, small business owners who are already struggling to pay the bills, are working in their business day in, day out, will now be forced to spend a ridiculous amount of time, of their own time, or a ridiculous amount of money with solicitors in order to understand these new obligations. Matthew Addison from the Council of Small Business Organisation agrees, saying the issues of confusion and complexity remain, combined with an increased requirement for every business, small or large, to dedicate resources, time and money towards trying to understand and implement these onerous new obligations. At a time when small businesses are managing increased costs of supply, of rent, of power, of wages, we don't need changes that detract business from their sales and service delivery. Small business seek to employ and properly reward their workers. They seek to innovate and adopt new technology. And what have other businesses in my electorate been saying? Well, they're scared, they're impassioned, and their infuriated business owners are certainly disheartened. Speaking to one business owner, he said he's questioning why he's even doing this anymore, saying he's considering walking away entirely. And the impact of that? 30 to 35 staff he also employs will be out of a job. And that's just one business. Imagine if all the businesses in my electorate closed their doors right now. Under the Labor government, his rent has increased, cost of supplies has skyrocketed, and workforce shortages are constant and a never-ending battle. Now, the Labor government has given him 801 pages of homework to do. These are the costs that business must either absorb, which is unsustainable for business, or they must pass on to the consumers, who can't afford to pay any more. Another business owner said, it's all well and good for Minister Burke to say the business owners will be able to pass the costs on to consumers. In his words, it's only a little bit more. But a little bit more for one consumer who is already struggling to make ends meet excuse me, turns into one less sale for that business. Multiply that by 26 million people in Australia, and that's a lot of less sales for businesses. The consequences of these amendments will result in increased inflation, increased cost of living, decreased profit to businesses, business closures and job losses on a potentially exponential scale, resulting in increased pressure on government-funded welfare systems. But this is textbook Labor, and we can see it play out over and over again. Deputy Speaker, for anyone who doesn't know, if you do a quick Google search, what caused the recession, you will find the following. As corporations and households get overextended and face difficulties in meeting their debt obligations, they reduce their investment and consumption, which in turn leads to a decrease in economic activity. According to the businesses that I've spoken to on this topic, the writing is already on the wall. The last time Australia entered into a recession was in the early 90s, after Labor had been in government for 7 years. And in mid-2007, Australia watched the global financial crisis cripple the world. While we did experience some hardships as a nation, thankfully we did not experience the widespread devastation that the rest of the world did. Who was in government at the time of the GFC? And who had been in government ensuring Australia has a strong economic foundation for years before the GFC? You guessed it, the Coalition, the Liberal and National Party. Now, in 2023, under another Labor government, we are facing yet another serious threat of another recession. And what is the Labor government doing about it? Nothing. Nothing but making it worse. Labor spoke about being the party of the people. But if that is so, why are you subjecting Australia to such devastating consequences? If the Labor government don't start realising the consequences of their actions, they're going to grind this economy to a halt. Just like the Swiss cheese paradox, welcome to the Labor government paradox, where they say and promise one thing, all wrapped up in fancy, hoping and promising sounding names. The reality is they're making an economic situation in this country worse. It seems on theme, Deputy Speaker, that I'm standing here before you again, calling on the Albanese Labor government, calling on Minister Burke to reverse their decisions. I am calling on the Albanese Labor government to think about what this is doing to the people of Australia and to the good people in my electorate of Dawson. Don't condemn us to more cost of living pressures. Don't condemn us to business closures. Don't condemn us to job losses. Don't condemn us to bankruptcy. And don't condemn us to even more homelessness. The time to do the right thing is now. In this Labor-created cost of living crisis, do not make this situation worse. Do not make the situation worse with radical, ill-conceived industrial relations laws.
I thank the member for Dawson.